Good morning, everyone. I will now call the hearing to order.
Give me 1 second.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'll now call the hearing to order. As directed by Manitoba Health, we're requesting people avoid close contact within 2 meters with anyone showing symptoms of a respiratory illness, such as coughing or sneezing. If you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, we are requesting that you excuse yourself from the room. I believe we don't have multiple applicants via Zoom. Is that right, Kara?
That is right.
Okay, thank you. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. This morning I will be chairing the hearing. My name is Robert Hutchings. My other panel members today are Ms. Billinghurst and Mr. Diamond. And our recording secretary is Ms. Balshaw. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by this Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with this Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by cross-examination by the appellant and then the panel members, and then the appellant's testimony followed by cross-examination by the assessor and then the panel members again. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decision based on the evidence presented here today. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Thank you. Okay, first item on the docket today will be 840 Sargent Avenue, and we're dealing with a 2021 realty appeal. There is a preliminary issue here. The assessor is requesting burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation of income information, Mr. Colatriglio. And I also know there's a recommendation on the property as a secondary issue here, but shall we deal with the burden of proof request shift, please?
Before you begin, I'll just have you state your name for the record, please.
Mark Colatriglio.
Do you affirm the evidence that you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Oliveros, could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Ryan Oliveros.
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Mr. Assessor, please.
Ryan, did you want me to go through this whole thing, or are you guys do you want me to just keep it short and sweet?
Yeah, just keep it short and sweet. We're not contesting the penalty today, and we will also be accepting the recommendation as well. So.
Okay.
I can read it in if you want and just summarize.
Yes, Mr. Colatriglio, please, for the record, read in everything, and also we'll have to go through the request for non-cooperation, I guess. Although the applicant's agent is not fighting that non-cooperation request, is that right, sir?
That's correct. Yes, Mr. Hutchings.
Okay. Well, okay. Start, Mark, with the non-cooperation. and justify that, and then we'll deal with that first, and then we'll go into the recommendation and the reason for the recommendation.
Sure. So we're dealing with file number 20-481, roll number 13022507000. The address is 840 Sargent Avenue. There is the preliminary issue of the request for the burden of proof to be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation of section 53(3) subsection B of the Municipal Assessment Act. And that if the reduction in assessment is ordered, it followed section 54(3.2) of the Municipal Assessment Act. So I'll take you through to page 9 of my brief. This is the cover letter that was submitted with the second mailing for the income and expense questionnaire. You can see in the top left-hand corner, just under the city logo, Canada Post tracking number, LP 578649335CA. If you continue on, page 10 and 11, you'll see the blank income and expense questionnaire, as well as the tenant verification form. Page 12, you'll see the registered mail envelope with the same tracking number, LP 578649335. That's just in the top right corner, just left of the paid postage Canada Post logo there. And then page 13, just the tracking report for that same tracking number to show that there was someone who received this and signed for it on looks like June 7th of 2018. So we did not receive a response, therefore we're seeking the non-compliance and deferral penalties for that.
Okay.
That's basically the preliminary issue on the file.
Okay. I think I understand that the appellant is accepting this, but I think the panel will recess to review the information, and then so we'll ask all the people in the audience to leave the room, please, and we'll recess while we consider this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Okay. The panel is going to grant the request for burden of proof and non-cooperation. But Mr. Coltrigill, since there's a recommendation, accepted recommendation here, I think we're just going to go straight to you to detail what the recommendation was made for and everything, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So the original assessed value under appeal is $713,000. Through some discussion with the agent, we came to an agreement on a revised rental rate for one of the two premises. If you flip to page 6 of my brief, you'll see the workup for the recommendation. Basically, the change here was the rental rate on the first premise. That is the 1,000 square foot premise. We've revised the rent to $15 a square foot, and that's how we arrive at the new number of $568,000. That's my final recommendation on that.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to confirm, Mr. Applicant, you are in agreement at $568,000.
Yes, we are in agreement to accept the recommendation to $568,000.
Okay, thank you. Harvey, any questions of either party?
No, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Marla?
No questions.
Okay. And I have no questions either. Okay, thank you very much, both parties. That concludes 840 Sargent Avenue.
And I think that's the only one. So I thank you all for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the morning.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Coltrillo.
I'd come to the hearing looking like that too.
Okay.
So, Mr. Hutchings, just to be clear on this next file, there was originally a preliminary issue that was put into the brief. We're not going to be seeking that today, just because some new information came up in regards to the ownership of the property.
You still need, Gary, you still need hard copies? How many?
Just one copy to you.
Okay. Next property on the docket, I believe is 759 St. Mary's Road. Is that correct?
No, we're at 1214 Pembina Highway, item 3.
Sorry. I have my papers. Okay. All right, 1214 Pembina Highway. Mr. Colatriglio, so you're not requesting the non-cooperation preliminary issue, is that correct?
That's correct. On this file, we will not be seeking those penalties.
Okay, thank you. Okay, when you're ready to begin, 1214 Pembina Highway, Mark.
Thank you. File number 20-348, the applicant Colliers International. The roll number here is 030902700000. The address 1214 Pembina Highway. Roll year under appeal 2021 with a April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal $439,000. Class code 60 property, and the liability is taxable. We currently have this listed under a parcel use of commercial retail store. This is one building with one premise, actual year built 1959, and we have an effective age of 1979 on the property. The masonry bearing walls, C2 zoning, leasable area of 1,728 square feet, and a plan area of 1,728 as well. The land area here, 3,875 square feet. You flip to page 2. You can see some history in regards to the sale of the subject property. So there is a sale that occurred in 2018, late in the year. That's the most recent sale. It's not shown here on the brief because that's post-reference to the April 1st, 2018 reference date. However, that's the reason that we're not seeking the non-compliance issues. But you'll also see that there are two sales, one in 2016, this is a dollar sale with a sworn value of $510,000. And prior to that, there was a sale September 3rd of 2015, where the sale price is shown as $510,000 with a sworn value of $510,000. Those subject property leases found on file. If you flip to page 3, you'll just see some photos showing the location of the parcel. This is located directly with frontage on Pembina Highway. There is some parking to the rear of the property. And if you flip to page 4, you can see the front and back of the building from the street level. So this is just your typical street front retail on Pembina Highway. It's fairly high traffic. If you flip to page 5, you'll see the rental comparables that I've selected for this property. I tried to stick with retail store properties along Pembina Highway for the comparables. You'll notice that there's a range in regards to the net rent per square foot that's reported, as low as $14 a square foot and as high as $19.83 a square foot. Flip to page 6 of the brief, you'll see the income workup for this property. Again, we've got one premise, 1,728 square feet. The model rent that's applied is $15.58 a square foot, to get a total potential rent of $26,922. We have 6% vacancy loss, 2% non-refundable expense allowance that's applied, and shortfall at $6.50 a square foot, to arrive at a net operating income of $24,127. The overall cap rate applied by the model is 5.5%, and capitalizing that net operating income by that rate, you arrive at the $439,000 value. Page 7, again, is just a summary of the income value we worked up. Page 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, you can disregard. That's due to the fact that we're not seeking the non-compliance because the ownership had changed. But if you flip to page 14, you'll see that there's a property sale questionnaire that was submitted to the city in relation to the September 2015 sale. And this is something that we send out in response to sales to gather some understanding about what has occurred in that transaction. You'll see that the person who's filled out this form has indicated that the consideration paid shown above is the correct total sales price, so that's the $510,000. They indicate that this was a arm's length open market transaction, and that no other items other than the real estate were included in the purchase price. No market value appraisal report or opinion of value was completed on the property. Full interest sale, and they indicate that there was an intent to occupy the premise or part of the property after the sale. So they indicate that the property was used for retail at the time of sale. The intended use of the property is not the same. They were planning on using it for an internet cafe at the time, and they list overall condition of the building on site at the time of purchase as average. So if you flip to page 15, you'll notice that I've redacted the mortgage information, the purchase information for this property. That's just out of privacy concerns for the owner. But you'll also notice that the property was tenant occupied at the time of sale, and that the purchase price was not based on a net operating income at a specific cap rate. So when we're looking at verifying sale information, this is part of that process. We would look at this and see that this is a sale that occurred on the open market that did not include any other items other than the realty. This would be a sale that we would look to as a benchmarker for value, and that's a sale that occurred 3 years prior to the reference date at a higher level than the current assessment. So therefore, we're seeking confirmation of the value today at $439,000. The remainder of the brief is just our standard cap rate package, as well as some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and then our standardized City of Winnipeg Port Revision Addenda package, which you guys have seen. So I won't go through that stuff. But that is my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Assessor. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor?
Just before he asks, I'm just going to swear the applicant's in. So for the record, please state your name.
Rocky Neufeld.
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And you may proceed with questions if you have them.
Yes. So the current owner and use is Grant Crown and Bridge. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they also own the unit at 1210 Pembina as well, correct?
They may. I did not review that property as part of this.
Okay. So when a person buys the property next door to their existing building, it comes under the heading of assemblage, correct?
It may. Again, I'd have to review both.
Well, assuming I mean, it's at a hearing next week, so it will be entered in evidence. I just wish it was here today.
No.
But if you have two properties beside each other and one business owner buys the one next door, it's fair to say that the sale would be an assemblage sale.
It could be interpreted that way for sure.
Now I noticed that the subject has a basement.
It may have a basement. We don't have that listed as lease floor.
No, I know. On page 1 it says basement. Now, was my question. You're not considering it leasable.
Correct.
Okay. And your comparables, rental comparables, on page 5, do you know what uses these are?
There's a variety of different uses. One is a veterinary business. There's a internet cafe type of a gaming store, I guess you could call it. A recycling business in one of these, and then just retail for the others. Primarily retail usage throughout the comparables.
Anyone who's in the same line of business?
As the current usage?
Yes.
No, not identical to. We wouldn't necessarily pick the comparables based on the tenant, more of the usability of the space. The current usage doesn't always direct what could be done there in the future, or if it was rented out in the open market.
Now, in terms of age and location, is it fair to say that 1220 Pembina would be the most similar? Your rest of yours are all fairly newer, correct?
Yeah, that would be the closest in age for sure.
And it's next door, so you can't get much closer than that.
Correct.
And that was a former bank, Nova Scotia?
I believe so, yeah.
Now you have the rent at $16. Do you know what the operation is in there now?
Yeah, like I said, it's
a gold trader.
Correct.
And there's a basement in there as well.
I'm not certain on whether there's a basement or not, but I believe the rent we have is for the main floor space.
Do you have that form to support the $16?
No, I do not have the income and expense questionnaire for that property.
Do you know that it's been entered incorrectly, that that's a semi-gross lease, which includes taxes and maintenance?
No, I do not have that information to confirm or deny that. What we have is a rental rate that was entered as net in our system and therefore was used today in the presentation.
Okay, entered as net. Now, it's a client of mine, and I've testified both for it, and we brought in the income and expense forms. Evidence already given to this board, it is a semi-gross rent. So would that change your opinion on what the rent rate would be next door?
Yeah, I'd have to review it. Okay. Obviously, if it's semi-gross, there's certainly considerations that would need to be made. But even if you remove that comparable from the listing, the range still remains kind of the same, $14 up to $19.83, and we're kind of on the lower side of that range.
With all newer buildings.
Correct.
And I'm just 1473 and okay, thanks. No, I was just recalling the favor. Now, in regard to your cap rate, did this come right from your model?
Yes, it's a model cap rate.
So I'm just looking at your model. What line does that come from?
So we actually don't show retail stores on this table, that on page 16.
Okay.
And that's typically something that is fairly common even in the third-party companies that do cap rate publishings. Storefront retail like that, you typically don't see the cap rates reported by Altus, Colliers, the firms that do the the cap rate studies, they don't provide that stuff, and you'll see that we don't have that data for the outside sources. So.
But you've got an old building in a high traffic but low retail area like Pembina. It's not retail anymore, it's changed. At the lower end of the range, would you think that an investor wouldn't they want to have a retail investment in places people go to shop? Like shopping centers, Waverly, McGilvery, that sort of place, St. Patel Center.
They may, but again, the usage of the property is flexible, and the location remains desirable just by nature of good exposure on Pembina Highway, high traffic. It's hard to beat location. Even with an older building, you can do work to upkeep and modernize older buildings to conform to modern standards, within reason. But location doesn't change regardless of
Okay, age is one of your factors though in the model?
It is. Yeah.
Okay. And you're not going to get away from it, but later on there's two properties that are newer that you've capped higher. Your model is capped higher. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on that now.
Again, there's all sorts of factors that go in. It's not necessarily one specific variable that would drive the cap rate. Location will play into it as well, market region. Those things all have an effect on the cap rate. So yes, you may see some newer properties elsewhere in the city with higher cap rates.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diamond, any questions of the assessor?
Yes, so I'm looking at cap rates, and I'm looking at the city's table.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at retail because it seems like that's where you've got this.
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm looking at, I'm not sure what it would be. It's not certainly not a power center. It's maybe community neighborhood, maybe strip. I'm not sure. But what do you have it at?
It wouldn't fall under any of the categories you see there. The city of Winnipeg property type class, the PTC, for this one is a retail store, RET. And again, the outside sources that we collect information on in regards to cap rate studies, they don't publish on this stuff.
I heard that already. So why would it be capped though at a lower rate than, for example, a neighborhood or community center?
Again,
This is one little building. It seems to me that if anything, we cut at a higher rate.
well, it's a model rate. So like I said, there's many factors that go into it, and the rates you see there are a range. They're not necessarily always going to fall on the low end of that range either, right?
No, it's falling below it actually in this case.
Yeah, it is. Well, we don't show
The models.
Yeah.
Um,
But the closest, I guess, would be the strip, which indicates a 5.4 on the low end. So we're in slightly higher than that. But yeah, your comments are accurate.
so Mr. Kalushi, you're considering this building as a strip mall?
No,
No. Okay.
absolutely not.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions.
Thank you, Harvey. Marla, any questions of the assessor?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Carlo Triglio, I just want to clarify that sale that occurred in 2015. Did you state that was an open market sale? Was it listed by a real estate agent, or would you have any information on that?
Well, like I said, if you flip to the questionnaire that we sent out to verify some of that information,
Okay,
the owner who filled out that form has indicated that this was an arm's length open market transaction.
okay. Okay, that's my only question. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Neufeld, when you are ready, please.
Thank you, and there will be a bit of verbal rebuttal, so I will be discussing some evidence of the assessors in addition to my own.
Okay.
Pointing out on page 2 of the assessor's brief, the 3 listed sales. Of course, everybody knows the first sale with a sworn value is no basis for comparison. And I'm looking at the 2 older sales and how does a property go from 147,000 to 510? Yeah, it's a long period, but that sort of growth isn't market driven. The indications I have that this may have been some outside motivation involved with the provincial nominee program for immigrant investors. There's a minimum amount that's required. So we don't care to rely on those sales because there's outside motivation. The current property owner, of course, I mentioned, does crowns and dental, is a denturist and has the building next door, and he purchased it to expand his business. So again, that sale's not reliable. We really shouldn't be looking at sales that can't be supported. And let's just go back to the income approach. Now, on that basis, the assessor's rent for the building next door is 1220 Pembina. That is my client's building. I've been involved with this building for 12 years now. It was a Bank of Nova Scotia on a semi-gross rent. The taxes are included. That's why I've always filed the appeal for it, because Bank of Nova Scotia wasn't paying the taxes, so they didn't really care. They have their own person. My friend Iqbal would be the guy he would talk to and bring it in, because he does the Bank of Nova Scotia. But as a semi-gross rent, and it's every cycle we've brought it in, and it's been the confusion over the rent, and it's a bank. It's $12 a foot, really, when you work out the number on that property as semi-gross. I missed this. I should have brought some rebuttal in for you, so I'm providing it verbally. We're well aware of it. And what's important about that property, and I was leading the assessor on a bit about questions, but Bank of Nova Scotia abandoned this because they didn't like the location anymore. Nobody wants to be on Pembina Highway who's doing a service like that. You know where they've moved, because they're visible where they've moved. They've moved to where the people are. And Pembina Highway which used to be a very, very strong retail area, is all migrated. It's migrated to the power centers. Pembina, Waverley and McGilvery have got the greatest part of it. So right now what we have on Pembina Highway is moving to more of a service-oriented location. In this case, a denturist. Our rent was $12, and I see we failed to put in the rent from 1220 Pembina as support for that. However, on my page 4, top rent, $10.11, a denture clinic, just half a block away. And that was the 2017 start. And it is smaller, but $10.11. And there are a number of other Pembina Highway locations in our rent comparables. We've given you several pages of I marked the copy up, sorry. I'm reading the wrong one here. Several pages of properties on Pembina Highway that represent vintage, the same vintage and the same style. On the page 3, for example, 1483 Pembina, which is an office building, struggled for rents. $9 is what it's getting. 850 Pembina, which is a more modern office building to the north, recently put in a new tenant at $950. So this is an indication that that stretch of Pembina Highway is not getting good rents right now. And it's just when you're in the retail business, things move. You move with retail follows residential. So I think $12 is a fair rate. Now we put in our own numbers for vacancy and shortfall, and I don't think that they're actually our vacancy is actually lower and our shortfall is higher. Those issues are what we're moving to in all of our work for the Board of Revision is we've been so disappointed with the cap rate analysis performed by the city that we just think that we have to go back to forgetting about the parameters. You can't accept one part of the parameter and say another part of the parameter is not reliable. So for us, none of it is reliable anymore. Now, the numbers are similar and they're not going to make a big difference in value. So we're presenting them. And of course, non-recoverables, everybody's heard the argument already. The non-recoverables are not erased with the stroke of the assessor's pen. They exist. They must be considered. You know, 1 year they're in, next year they're out. That's not the market. That's an administrative decision. And the board is charged with reading the market and commenting on the market, not what an administrator says. Moving to the capitalization rate, I think the assessor's comments in that respect were fair. Nobody tracks these because they're miscellaneous retail. And oftentimes when you try to do a cap rate on a miscellaneous retail sale, most practitioners are trying to chase a sale and put a cap rate on that fits the sale. It just doesn't work like that. You can't have an artificial cap rate. These are the poor investment properties. Nobody will buy this for a 5% cap rate. It's going to have to generate a higher cap rate to garner any investor interest. Now, we've put in 875, and that's I would agree that that is probably towards the higher end, but we're not going to see a rate that drops below 7% on these. These will likely cap in the neighborhood of low 7s to mid 8s, depending on the strength of the tenant. So if Bank of Nova Scotia was in it, you get a good rate. That's not how you do assessment work, because you can't have a concern about who the tenant is. The 1959 building was a wonderful year, but that's not going to get a good cap rate because it's a question of the remaining economic life. Renting to a dentist, who's the next tenant going to be? And that's the question you ask yourself. You're not putting in a premium tenant after this. You're going to have a succession of local tenancies who are prone to failure, and more so than someone with an international covenant. So we have a number of caps in here, and as I mentioned, you're not going to find a cap that's reliable for a small property like these. The ones we had done on page 40, for example, which was a real cap on a restaurant at 9.47%. That's the closest we have to this, a sort of a single tenancy, older building that with local users. There's one on page 39, and it's an older one. This was a conversion of an office space to a salon, and that got an 8% cap rate in November. And those would be the two strongest that I would bring forward for consideration. We are flexible on the cap. I think there's a possibility it should be lower than 875, but and I know it's a little bit, well, you're going to hear evidence later today on better properties capped higher. That's all I can say. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Assessor, any questions of the appellant?
Yeah, just in regards to the suggestion that the 2015 sale should not be relied upon for other reasons. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like in my mind, there's a legal obligation to register with land titles a sworn value on the date of registration. And part of the purpose of doing that is paying your land transfer tax. In what situation would someone inflate the value for the purpose of paying higher taxes? What kind of outside motivation would cause a situation like that?
Well, I think you have such a wonderful nature to assume that people always will tell the truth and follow the laws. That's a nice thing to have, and don't ever lose it. I myself speed all the time, and I break the law because I don't like that law. The problem with sales, and the province had this program, a provincial nominee program, and you had to invest a set amount of money, and it had to be mixed in terms of the business operation, the real estate, and it was $1 amount. So in this time period, I was doing a fair amount of appraisals for people who were in the provincial nominee program, and were trying to establish what their investment was for gaining entrance. Now that's the investment program. That's since stopped. It no longer exists. There's other forms of it, but this particular one had $1 amount. And the issue with doing appraisals for these small businesses like this is that the person who bought it was targeting a number that met the program. So we tend to look on those sales as questionable. And I can't say that I have any direct knowledge in this case. I can say that I have my doubts on this, and that's really as far as I can take it. And as far as people putting their numbers on, I don't know how to tell you this, but people don't like paying land transfer tax either. So they're always trying to find ways around that on the title system. So it's just human nature we're dealing with. Some people are motivated for high numbers, some are motivated for low. Wait, I'll put it a better way. I don't put reliance on any sale that I haven't been able to witness and talk to the vendor, purchaser myself to determine if it meets the standards of market value. And I have my doubts on this one.
Okay. And the current owner, I know this is post-reference, but they purchased the property following after the sale in 2015 has occurred.
Well, sure. And as I said, we did talk to them, and why did you buy it? And he said, well, because it was next door and it was available. And it was more expensive for me to move my business. I wanted to expand than it was to. Now, an assemblage value, we've done a lot of work on assemblage values because it often appears in litigation or in assembling a larger development. So the premium for assemblage is a minimum of 35% that I've seen, and I've seen 200% on some cases.
Okay. And just beyond the few rental comparables provided for Pembina Highway, it seems that, I've shown some in my brief that are on the a lot higher than any of the, I guess 2589 Pembina Highway would be the top end of the range for rents on Pembina that you're reporting, correct?
Yeah, but that's in a different market section on Pembina Highway. That's actually an interesting part of Pembina that was built in this. The whole area was developed in the 60s, and it's only been in recent years that it's finally filling in and getting interest from retail, because retail never had enough of a trading area behind it until very recently, and that occurred with expansion of Richmond West and then Waverly West and the road hookups. So now there's far more interest in being out there.
Okay, and then just in relation to the comments in regards to the age of this property is typical for that area, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mark. Marla, any questions of the appellant?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Diamond.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Neufeld. So regarding the 2015 sale, do you have any knowledge that this was marketed on the open market?
I don't know. I never saw this property in any listings. So I don't know for sure.
Okay. Any information from a conversation with the owner?
Oh, he had no knowledge of that 2015 transaction at all. That was outside his involvement time period.
Okay. Okay. So I know you've said that the sale, there's some kind of, you're not considering an arm's length sale, I believe.
Oh, no, it may have been arm's length. My concern is under the definition of market value is the undue pressure issue or outside motivations, other motivations.
Okay.
Chairman, could I ask Mr. Nico some questions on that after you're finished?
Of course.
Thank you.
So you're in your work up here today, you're saying the value should be 197,000. So I guess what I'm looking at is you're saying that the market value on this property has dropped in value by about 65% from that sale in 2015. Does that
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the sale shouldn't be considered in the first place as an indicator of market value. So our start point is erased. The drop in value is actually, Pembina Highway is getting worse rents now than it was in past years. And lastly, I think our cap rate here, I did not prepare this. I think our cap rate is a bit on the high side. And I would think that a number in the mid sevens would probably be closer. And I can't find a calculator here they took them all away, or maybe I stole them all.
Yeah, okay, that was going to be my next question. You had said something about that. So are you saying now that you would think like 7.5%?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That would be my opinion, my verbal opinion. Oh, here we go. And that's 230,333 rounded to 230,000.
Yeah, okay.
And that's pretty similar to what the value we have for 1220 Pembina was. Actually, there were some offers on 1220 next door at 240 in this time period. So again, that's all verbal, but those are transactions with that are more reliable.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Mr. Diamond.
Yeah, so Mr. Nico, you indicated the sale that the assessor is referring to is should be relied upon because you thought it was bought for an immigrant nominee program purchase?
That's just hearsay. I don't have proof.
But if it was in fact registered at a higher amount than was actually the purchase price, the lawyers would have to be involved because they'd have to register the property. So you think that the lawyers are being fraudulent? Because they'd have to be involved. They do the documents, the documentation. So they have to know about it. They have to know if they're putting it through a higher price, and they have to be committing fraud to do that. So are you suggesting that might have happened?
No.
And the second thing is that this will through a higher price. You indicated no, which I'm happy with. The next thing you indicated was that if they go through a higher price than in actual, then the vendor would have higher income tax to pay because he's got a higher capital gain. And if he's been taking depreciation of the property and have a lot of recapture that didn't really exist, they'd have to pay tax on it. So you think that's feasible? Would that happen?
Well, first of all, I rarely ever see a recapture issue on property because most people aren't depreciating it.
Well, I beg to differ with you on that. People usually would rather delay paying tax than later on.
Well, what the point is.
As a lawyer, I saw a lot of issues where the capture was a huge portion of the transaction. That's why very often
But you're
shares are sold. So
you're limited by CRA to write off, what is it, 4% per year of your improvement, and you don't depreciate land. So that's very, very small.
You can't depreciate land, you can depreciate building, I agree with that.
Right, and it's 4%.
But anyway, let's take.
So what are you gonna let, how much are you gonna lose if you have a building they built for $100,000 and you depreciate it at 4% and you recapture that?
Okay, I'm just suggesting to you that we're gonna be capturing, if you take it into capture, and you're gonna have a higher capital gain irregardless, because you're getting a higher sell price than in fact you.
Which is good.
It's good to pay.
They're good for capital gains because it's half the tax rate.
Not if you're not receiving that income though, is it?
But it's half the tax rate.
Absolutely. But
You
if
have-
you're not getting the money,
You have to declare the gain anyway. So you're either going to declare it as a profit,
I
a
understand that.
recapture, or a capital gain. What would
Mr. Duval, I understand that, but if you sold the property for more than you in fact sold it
you
for,
prefer?
you're
First
paying
of all,
capital gain of money you didn't receive.
no, you prefer moving it into a capital gain than you would.
Okay,
The
that's
only-
my question.
No, but this is, you asking very, very difficult questions in terms of the fact that we're testifying here. The motivation of most people in a transaction is to shift as much of any improvement in value into a capital gain rather than have to take it as a profit based on their business.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Right. And so from a vendor's point of view, it's not an issue. From a purchaser's point of view, the other motivations that take over and above the one that I was concerned about would be to set it up for a higher write-off to begin with in there. And
Yeah, but Mr. Duval, you said, okay, let's suppose you sold the building for $400,000, but you put it through at $500,000. The vendor's going to pay a capital gain of $100,000 they didn't receive.
but, okay, you and I are talking in generalities, discussing it, correct? And the point is that what I'm trying to say here, here's my main point, is that until you know the exact nature of this transaction, don't rely on it. That's what I want to say. Don't just bring it before someone and say, someone brought it to titles, it must be good.
Okay, any questions to ask and answer then? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diamond. Mr. Colatrigulo, are any requirement for summary at all?
I don't think so.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld?
2 factors, the rent next door is $12, good rent for the subject. The other dentures down half a block away is $10.11. 2 similar uses, 2 similar age buildings. The cap rate's too low for what it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes 1214 Pembina Highway. I think, would anybody like a 6-minute break, 7-minute break, please? Okay, we'll recess for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
7.
Are we all ready now?
Just a few more moments here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to go ahead on it, so you'll see why.
Okay, I will now call the hearing back to order. Next property on the docket is 1500 St. Mary's Road. And we have no preliminary issues. So Mr. Colatrigulo, when you're ready, we're dealing with 1500 St. Mary's Road. It's a 2021 realty appeal.
And I'll just remind you guys that there is a recommendation beyond the initial brief that I've submitted. You guys should have it there. But we're dealing with file number 20-460. The applicant Colliers International, roll number 0800-482-6500. The address 1500 St. Mary's Road, and roll year 2021, then April 1st, 2018 reference date. Assessed value under appeal, $1,956,000. Classification is classified 60, and the liability is taxable. Again, we're dealing with a commercial retail store, 1 building with 2 premises, with a basement area as well. The actual year built and the effective age are the same at 2006, so a fairly newer building. and C2 zoning here, right along St. Mary's Road. The land area, 13,524 square feet, and the leasable area, 7,316 square feet. Look at page 2. You'll see that we've received the income and expense questionnaire for 2017. The last sale of the subject property is not very relevant in today's discussion. It's a September 2004 sale, so I won't go over that. Page 3, you'll see the some photos of the location of the parcel. This is located at 1500 St. Mary's Road. This is right across from St. Patel Shopping Center. So very high traffic, good exposure retail area here. And you'll notice in the bottom photo on page 3 that there is on-site parking as well on a fairly significant lot that you may not see elsewhere in street front retail like this. So they do have some on-site parking, which is a benefit. Page 4, you'll just see the street view of the subject property. Currently, I believe it's owner occupied. Actually, I'm not 100% certain as to owner occupancy, but there's an interior design business that operates out of there. If you flip to page 5, you'll see the rental comparables that I've provided. There is a range in regards to the net rent per square foot that's reported, as low as $18 a square foot and as high as $24.18 a square foot. I tried to stick to other high traffic retail areas within the city to draw from in regards to rental comparables, similar in size as well. Some of the smaller units aren't very comparable to something a little bit bigger like this. Flip to page 6. You'll see the income workup as originally produced by the model. We do have a recommendation on this file, and the recommendation comes from my review specifically of the basement area. So we did request some photos from the applicant. It's been tricky for us to do inspections with all this COVID stuff. But luckily, the applicant was able to send some photos of the property. So we did review the basement space. My opinion was that the rental rate, that the model rental rate that was applied to the basement area was very high. When I was looking at my recommendation, we made a reduction in the rental rate from $19.49 to $10.53. And that's done through the model based on tweaking some of the quality and condition variables. So the revised value with the lower basement rent, you arrive at a potential rent of $152,745, 6% vacancy loss, 2% non-recoverable expense allowance, including management, and shortfall at $650 a square foot to arrive at a net operating income of $137,855. The cap rate applied to this property, 7.75%, and the capitalized value at $1,779,000. So that will be my final recommendation on the value of this property. Page 8, you see the income and expense information as submitted by the owner. Just jogging my memory here, it is fully owner occupied as I suggested, so they do indicate that on the questionnaire. And page 10, 11, through to the back of the brief, again, our cap rate table, which again, because this is retail store, we don't show that range. And some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and then our standard order revision addendum package attached to the back of the brief. Yeah, my recommendation here is just to reduce the assessment to $1,779,000. Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld, any comments on that recommendation?
We'd like to proceed, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Neufeld, any questions on the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes. Just on a point of order, I've run into this before where we've chosen to proceed when a recommendation has been given. Am I asking questions on the recommendation or asking questions on the original brief?
Well, the recommendation is put forward, you're rejecting it, so either or, I guess.
Well, no, it's not an either or, because like I don't make the decision on what happens when I don't accept a recommendation, right?
Right.
So if the board's of the opinion that represents the new value, I will ask questions based on that. If I don't think this is my call.
Okay, no, the board is not, we may not necessarily accept that recommendation. We're going to review the information based on the original.
Okay.
And the revised.
Right. Thank you. The rents you have, sorry, the original workup was all model driven then?
Correct, yeah.
And the recommendation was an override on the model? Or was it a change in class on the model?
Well, it's a change in some of the qualitative variables,
So-
basement space specific.
Oh, you just changed the quality. So the physical condition that went into the model, which changed the model rent?
Correct.
Okay. That answers the board.
Just based on review of the photos, right?
Yeah, but it wasn't a change in a market decision. It was just a change in the physical attributes.
Correct.
Okay. So in that case, I would think that that's a physical issue that's been repaired, not a market issue for the board's, my comment on the board, my question to the board. The rents that you've chosen, or sorry, did you choose these rents?
The comparables that you see on
Yes,
page 5?
yes.
Yep, I did select those.
Okay.
comparables.
And I note that with the exception of one, they are all lower than what's been applied to the subject.
Correct, yeah, some of these are older properties, built in the 90s, whereas this is built in mid-2000s. One is newer, that's the one you can see on the high side of the range. But I tried to select properties that were similar in size. This is a larger retail store than you'd see typically in some of the other street front buildings. So we tried to select things that are similar in size.
In size, and now
Size and age, I mean.
size and
yeah,
age.
Yeah.
Okay, but location, that was my next question. You've got one on St. Mary's at $18, and the rest are in other parts of the city. Is that not correct?
That is correct, yeah. So I tried to select other areas that are high traffic retail areas as well.
The first one, this is the vet clinic?
Correct.
Okay. So that is a different usage?
It is, yeah.
Do you have any idea whether or not the equipment in the vet clinic, I presume they do procedures on animals in there?
I would imagine so, yeah.
Whether any of that infrastructure was amortized in the lease?
That I couldn't tell you.
Okay. The next one, is that a fitness center? Snap Fitness?
It is, yeah.
Okay. On Osborne.
Right.
So, getting back to the first one, do you have any idea of the building code standards for a veterinary clinic?
I do not.
Okay. Snap Fitness, would be then a high usage, a high occupancy load in Snap Fitness. Is that fair to say? Lots of machines and people are on the machines. It's probably denser than the subject.
I don't know if I would go
Okay.
as far as to say that, but
Do you have any knowledge of its construction?
the Snap Fitness, the property on Osborne?
Yeah.
No, I
Okay. Now in that mall on Osborne, there is food service operations, correct?
I believe some of the tenants, yeah. May
Okay.
do food service.
1561 Regent, is that a toy store?
It is.
Okay, and then that's part of the mall?
It's a standalone retail store.
Pad site?
It's all pad site, yeah.
On a mall, on
Yeah.
what would you call that, a power center?
You may call it a regional shopping center, or your neighborhood shopping.
Right, but that's the one, it's got, the anchors in that mall are Walmart, Home Depot. Is that the one I'm thinking of?
No.
No, okay. Yeah, I don't get that way that often. Well, who are the anchors then?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest.
Okay, but it's a shopping center, okay. 1074 St. Mary's Road is which tenant is this? There are several on that.
It's a dollar store?
The Dollarama, okay. Now in that mall, next door to the mall, in the same building is a food service operation, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
And the other pad sites are food service operations. And that's at the junction of St. Mary's and I've forgotten the name of the road where Dunkirk comes in, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And you did not get a chance to inspect the subject property?
I have not had a chance. This cycle has been very difficult for us.
No,
Inspection.
that's fair. And did you have a chance to review any of the physical information on the file on this property, such as the style of construction?
Yeah, I mean, so part of the correspondence with you guys at Colliers was requesting some details in regards to what the basement space was like,
Right.
what the overall property was like. There was pictures that were exchanged. I did review those pictures as part of the review of this hearing. So I'm familiar with the inside of the property through a review of the photos.
So you're aware that it is wood frame construction with a wood truss and deck system that it's exposed on the inside? And of course, moving ahead to my page 6, I'm speaking of the, you have color? Oh, right, that's a spare for you.
Are you referring to page 9, the top photos? That's what you're talking about?
Well, page 9 is in the one of the areas, the unfinished areas. For example, page 6, the bottom picture, the wood truss, exposed wood truss in the showroom.
Yeah, I do see that.
Now, does your department make a difference in type of construction for retail buildings in its parameters?
If we were to use a cost approach, which we don't on these retail buildings, there would be a difference, and we would make that distinction. In regards to what the space could rent for, I don't believe that there's any modification to the rent.
Well, what I'm referring to is the use of the building and what you're permitted or what you would have to do to be fire code. For example, your examples are veterinary clinic, which has a different standard under National Building Code. And two of the other operations have food service beside them, which are a different fire standard. And I'm going to suggest to you that wood framing, wood truss and deck are not approved for food service operation buildings. So that's what I'm getting at. Did you study any of that information?
I haven't reviewed any of the building code. Again, my review is looking at what the space offers in regards to rentability in the market. The usage is retail. What is retail space of this age, of this size, within the city go for on a per square foot basis? And that's the income approach that we apply for the assessment.
But when you assign, or when a rent is assigned to a building, it's based on the concept of alternate uses. What other uses could be in there, not just the subject.
Correct.
Right. And so what I'm getting at is, aren't the alternate uses of a wood truss and deck more limited than the standard one, which is a steel truss and deck, because of fire?
Maybe.
Fire
I
protection.
mean, it would take some further review for sure. And I mean, any tenant that's looking at that space would have to do their own due diligence before they, enter a lease agreement to rent out that space.
But costs are going to be involved, are they not?
It may, again, that's not the nature of my business.
But we're aware that the fire code wouldn't allow a food service operation to be in this current code. I'm not talking about old uses that are legal non-conforming, but a current alternate use as a food service could not be put in a wood truss and frame building. You correct?
I haven't reviewed any of those documents, so it's hard for me to.
Now, there's a basement in here and now you've assessed how much space on the basement?
Well,
You
an area.
put a smaller area.
Yes.
So you've excluded the service areas.
1,662 square feet.
And do you have any basement rents to show the board?
In my brief, I did not.
Okay.
However, as part of the recommendation, I did do some additional research in regards to basement rents. But no, as part of the brief, I didn't submit any basement rents. But when I reviewed the revised basement rent that forms part of the recommendation, it did fall.
Yeah, but you've got none for the board.
Not before the board.
And when you determine that a basement is rentable, are there any standards you have to apply, such as its own water closets, separate entrance ways, be able to be demised, and again, getting back to meeting fire code as well for primary use?
I'm not sure on the demising walls or the water closets. Access, we certainly take a look at. I wouldn't necessarily call this basement space independently leasable from the main floor.
That's fair.
Certainly usable space.
That's fair. No, I that's what I should have asked. It's not independent. Fair to characterize it more as accessory space to the main floor?
Yeah, again, my review is limited to pictures.
Okay.
I didn't have a chance to go in there, so for me to see the full access, it's difficult. From the photos, it looks like you access the basement through the main floor area.
Right.
So yeah,
Okay.
that's the extent of how I can comment on it.
And for this building, built in 2006, your cap rate remains unchanged at 7.75%, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And located across the street from a shopping center, newer age of the building, better part of town, 7.75%.
Correct.
I just told you I was going to bring that up again on the other one. So those are my questions.
Mr. Neufeld, is that it?
Yes, I'm sorry. That was it. Those were my questions.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Billinghurst, any questions of the assessor? Ms. Billinghurst, do you have a copy of the revised workup now?
Let me just check. No, I do not.
I believe our secretary just sent it to us.
Let me just try to refresh for 1 second and see if it came in. Oh, yes, sorry, I just had to refresh. Perfect. Okay, thank you. And that actually answered the question I had, so no point.
Okay.
Getting him to read me some of the numbers that I missed. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Mr. Diamond, do you have a copy of that revised workup? Okay. So do you have any questions, Ms. Billinghurst?
No, not anymore.
Mr. Diamond?
Yeah, I'm just extremely cheap here. I look at the model on the cap rate assessed this property, which appears to be a pretty good property.
Yep.
And like Mr. Neufeld, I'm wondering why the model would assess a 7.75% cap rate to this property and such a low cap rate to the property we just heard on Beverly Highway.
Size would play into it for sure. Size, age, location. To give you an exact reason as to which variable is causing, hard for me to say. But I understand the comparison between the two for sure. And it is an older building for the other property with a lower cap rate. for this property. And I mean, it's, again, if you're looking at things through a mass appraisal lens and then reviewing based on, my value, there are ways that if I was reviewing things and setting my own cap rate, I may suggest that a higher cap rate may be applicable, but a higher rent as well, right? And that's part of it. There's multiple components to the valuation, but
Sure.
I understand
Sure.
the comparison for sure.
Okay, well, Casey, I think it's more the common.
Yeah.
I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Diamond. And I have no questions. Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. First, that's just for Karen. Again, just starting out in rebuttal, and I realized I forwarded you the wrong information. What I had forwarded was National Building Code, the federal standards for federal occupancy, because it was short and it was sweet, was to the point about having to that you can't take over a building until it meets the code. The actual document I meant to send is 365 pages, and it's 8 megabytes. And I'm going to refer to it verbally, but the National Building Code has different standards for different forms of occupancy. In this case, it would fall under the fire system, and I've consulted with my contractor on this as well. So what happens if you decide to build a wood frame building? Basically, you have a limited occupancy, a limited number of users that can occupy this building. Certainly, I'm pretty certain that 3 of the assessor's comparables could not use the building. And they're limited to less high traffic. Now, the subject property is basically an interior decorator who brings limited amount of clients into the building. So anything with high traffic would require more non-combustibles, which would require steel deck, steel trusses, steel framing, because it doesn't burn as much. This is a wood frame building. You can see by the pictures, wood everywhere. And on my page, just to give you an idea of what our inspection, on my page 11, the bottom, that's a basement shot with the underside of the ceiling exposed to show that that is also a wood framed main floor as well. So there are a number of users who can take advantage of wood framing because it's cheaper to build, and that's why people do it. But retail is not one of them. And in my report, you'll see where we ended up leaning on for our final value. So that was the rebuttal portion of it. I sent you the wrong item. The building itself, we did manage to get an interior inspection because in this day of COVID, I'm not permitted to go and inspect buildings in high traffic areas. This one I could because there were no people in it. There were 2 staff members on site and no clients. And that tells you a bit about their operation. So we did manage to look through the whole building, and the pictures on page 5, the external side of it, like I said, it's a wood frame building. Those are EFIS panels, which is a foam paneling that's put on the outside for insulation. The inside, page 6, is all open. You can see, as I was mentioning, that the exposed ceiling is the wood trusses are showing on there. The rather dark, and then the bottom of page 7 shows another part of it where you can see a bit clearer that it's all wood frame, wood trussed. And for me, this is a major issue. It's a question of alternate uses. You can't put a restaurant in here. You can't put a retail with high traffic in there. And you can't put any company that wants to maintain its ISO, I don't know the number, 9001 status, because they will require a flammability standard. So large companies won't rent this. So this is a small user, and that limits attraction to the market. That's the bottom line. Page 9 is the top shows a cross section of again more wood trusses. This is in the warehouse portion. Top of page 9. Bottom of page 9 is the entranceway to the basement. Fairly basic construction. Page 10 is the basement. So what's down there is a sewing room and a storage / lunchroom. Page 11, or mechanical areas. I mentioned the roof. Page 12 is a mechanical area in the basement. The bottom of page 12 is the warehouse. This is the main floor. So we measured it, we paced it off. We didn't have our tapes with us, but it's approximately 1,000 square feet of the main floor is just warehouse, unfinished warehouse. You can see at the bottom of page 12, the pictures of it, and page 13 are 2 more angles of the warehouse space. Where is the lawnmower in this picture? I told them to put the lawnmower in the shot. Yes, the bottom of page 13. That's for cutting the grass on the subject. The front on page 14 is another portion of this, and this is a paint blending station. So this is in the site. This is a mixed use, you could call it industrial, retail. I mean, Home Depot's got paint mixing sites. Certainly, I don't see them in most retail places. So it's a working area. It's mostly for samples because they don't necessarily mix a lot of paint there for finishing people's houses off. They are interior decorators. So we ended up with a rent of, on page 1, of $18 on the store area, $8 for that warehouse section, and $5 on the basement. Now, what our blended rate is $13.68. Page 4 is a very, very similar building, and I am using another assessment, another decision, because this one was really interesting. This is 80 St. Anne's Road. This is Randall Holmes' office.
Mr. Neufeld, we're not going to consider this decision.
That's fine, but you don't mind if I read out or say what I want to say, and if you don't decide it bears any weight, that's fine. But there's some history on this that's relevant to an agreement with the assessment department.
Well, we don't know what happened. No, we're not going to consider it as evidence.
Okay, you're not going to consider it as evidence, but you're not going to prevent me from just saying what I want to say, are you?
Well, no, I guess not. If you wish, but
okay, well, that's fine. That's fair. This was built. This is a wood-framed structure. The same issues are on this, in that term, the alternate use. We have been debating this property with the assessor and with the bringing it to the board for several years. What we have ended up with was the same thing we're dealing with here before, a limited use building, and the blended rate, it's got second floor space, first floor space, and a basement that's an interior design studio, and that ended up at $13.60. And that was, this last year was a decision, the previous year was an agreement with the assessment department because of its unique style. Again, it's a building that has the limitations on its adaptability to other retail uses, and that's what we're dealing with. The other rents we have are a whole series of commercial rents on page 3. Now, the commercial rents that are probably the most pertinent are in the fourth one down, which is 1504 St. Mary's. That's immediately south of the subject property. This is a strip mall. There are about 10 units in it that range from 825 square feet to 4,500 square feet. 19 almost 20,000 square feet in total. We did not give you individual rents on these, but the total overall rent on the site is $15.65. And this is a steel, this is a masonry building with a steel truss and deck. And that's next door. So this is what the market is commanding. 10 units, $15.65. The rest of the properties, we had looked at a bunch of, several retail strip properties and listed them all. And they, of course, are showing a range of $12.75 to $20.15, location driven, obviously, because the Corridon sites were much higher than the other sites. But the next door neighbor at $15.65 is our strongest comparable. And that would come out to $2 a square foot higher than what we have, but of course, none of those have basements in them. Now, we did not put in our basement rents here, I noticed. We do have a table of basement rents, which couldn't make the evidence. Verbally, $4 to $5 on a basement. This is an accessory use basement. It is not separately rentable. You couldn't even put $1 on it. What you do with it is, it's just an arbitrary number that's put on the basement, which should reflect in a higher rent in the upper level for space that has basement. That's the appropriate procedure. But we are dealing with an assessment system that doesn't follow the appropriate procedure. And so we have expressed it in this manner. And when I say appropriate procedure, I'm talking about the one used by real estate brokers, real estate appraisers, and by BOMA. And by which all the other rents have their space calculated. And that's the major issue here. You can't make up a system with basements and apply rents when the market itself doesn't work that way. You have to bear in mind that the rents that are reported are driven by standards, and it's a question of comparing the same product to the same product. I'm not going to dispute the capitalization rate. We do have it a bit higher than the assessment department, but I think that and the other numbers, as I mentioned earlier, we are just doing our own workups now. We're not following the parameters. We're not going to dispute what the assessor has put in here. I think our main area of disagreement is an $18 rent on the bulk of the main floor, $8 in the warehouse section, and $5 on the basement. And bear in mind that on page 5 of the assessor's brief, he has a rent in the neighborhood at $18. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Mr. Colatriguero, any questions of the appellant?
I do have some questions. The rental rate that you arrive at warehouse space at $8, what do you base that on?
Well, when we initially did the workup, we were looking at the assessment on 80 St. Anne's Road and looking at a $13.60 blended rate for the whole premises. That was our original workup. And then the $18 on the upper level drove the rents on the other levels.
Okay, so basically it's just an arbitrary number to arrive at a blended rate that's closer to the other property.
Right, and I think the $8 is going to stand up well in the market for warehouse space on major thoroughfares where it's an accessory use. There are very few standalone warehouses or units on St. Mary's Road.
Right, like you said in regards to the construction, this isn't built as a warehouse, correct? This is built.
Yes, it is. That's what I'm saying. It's what's called pole frame construction, which is wood, and that's how we build a cheap warehouse.
And the warehouse space, however, like I'm looking at page. Looking at page 6, the top photo, I'm not seeing a loading dock for this property. It looks like just a double set of man doors at the back. That would be your loading, I guess, area.
Yeah, well, that's adequate for their use. I mean, if they're not trucking in pallets.
Right, but it's
Because,
not,
the wood floor can't support that weight, so you're not trucking in. It's a
correct, which that leads me to the point of why it's problematic to try to use a warehouse rent when the warehouse, those purpose-built warehouses are built with, loading docks with, higher load-bearing capacity with flooring, higher ceiling heights, et cetera. This is more built as a retail location, and the primary area of the store is used, in fact, as a retail showroom, with some working areas for sure.
well,
But it's not a purpose-built warehouse building, correct?
okay. It speaks to the low quality of that space, firstly. Secondly, when we're talking about warehouse usages, I consider paint mixing to be an industrial style usage. You don't see that in retail stores. You see it in some big box outlets like a Home Depot, Rona, Lowe's. They will mix paints. They're not retail. They're not interior decorators. So we do have it's a different use in the building, anchored, we'll call it anchored by the paint mixing facility with the warehouse at the back.
Right, and that's more related to this specific tenant's fit up of this building, correct?
Well, it's this nature of this operation is that they've done it. Now, if you want to consider it as retail space, then you also have to finish it as retail space, and it's not finished as retail space. And there's capital involved to convert it. You put the capital in, then you can increase the rent. Until you put the capital in, you can't increase the rent. So, I mean, a fairer way of saying this is we would never write this up on any sort of appraisal assignment on this basis. This is focused on the way the assessment department does it. So we have 91772. Really what we would do with this is I would say $100,082 would be the rent, and I would divide it by 5654. That's the way it should be, and that's 1770 on the main floor. And the rest is an accessory use on the basement, and the 1770 reflects part of the building as being inferior and part of being a basic.
Okay, and the $18 comes from a particular comparable or just a general?
Well, this was, as I said, when we originally did the workup, we had looked at this decision on 80 St. Anne's Road, which was consistent with decisions and agreements with the assessment department going back 8 years.
Okay.
And it would be a good, when we're dealing with these more unique properties, in that case, we thought until this year we had a good rapport and good ability to discuss that property. So it was well done by both sides, I thought.
Okay. And I know that the board's not going to put much weight on it, but just to point out that the cap rate in that board order was lower, 6.55.
Yeah, and that probably is way they reflected the level of finish, because the Randall was a show home quality. What they did with the upper floors was they finished it out in their show home finish to show prospective house buyers what could be done, and by room they showed the different things. So it's far superior to the subject. So you take that out in rent or take it out in cap, wherever you would have a choice.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Diamond, any questions of the appellant?
I don't have it, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Billinghurst?
Sorry. No, I'm okay. No questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Neufeld, was there a 2020 appeal on this property?
No, there wasn't.
Okay. And just,
Were you going to take that into account?
no, I'm just asking.
I was just being funny here.
Yeah. The use of this building, is it a paint store / design center? Is that fair?
Yeah, well, I put design center first, and then the paint is, I mean, I don't know if you've been through this, but when people are looking to design, having the paint shop there to make the samples on site is an advantage to interior decorating store.
So we're talking about a combined Benjamin Moore store and.
Right.
Yes. Okay. And lastly, correct me if I'm wrong, you've changed your cap, or you're accepting a cap rate of 7.75 on your net operating income at 85,497 equals a revised request for $1,100,000.
Yeah, I hadn't done the math, but yes, I think our main area of dispute, as I'm saying, is just the rental rates.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think those were my only questions. Requirement for summary by either party?
I'm okay.
Yes, I did have something to say. Personally, I don't want anyone to take my comments on the assessment department's criticism. It just comes out that way sometimes. What we're dealing with is two systems where the assessment department is not in step with the market. That's not a negative or a positive. It's just the way it is. And in the market, this property would be appraised, valued, sold, rented on only the main floor area. You could not even speak of the basement, you'd lose your license. And that is 56, 54 square feet. And that's how the rent would be expressed. So the number we have works out to $17.70 on the main floor area alone. Taking the total rent that we put here and putting it on there. That number is quite strongly supported by the one assessor comp down the street, which is superior in my opinion because of its construction at $18, and well supported and above the price of the strip mall next door. So I think that's a fair number at 1770 overall on the when we're comparing methods of measurement. That's where it would be. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Colacuglio, you're all right?
I'm okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that concludes, 1500 St. Mary's